Now we're going to talk about pregnancy, birth, and early childhood in chapter 19. So, did you know your body is made up of trillions of cells? And these cells form tissues, organs in your body. Your heart, lungs, skin, bones, and other organs all began as a single cell that is smaller than a period at the end of a sentence. So, let's talk about conception, fertilization first. So, the entire complex human body begins as one microscopic cell that is formed by the union of an egg cell or an ovum from a female and a sperm cell from a male. The union of a male sperm and a female egg is called fertilization. This is also known as conception, and the result of the forming of these two cells is a zygote. Notice that within a few days of the zygote forms, it begins dividing as it travels down the fallopian tube. By the end, it reaches the uterus. The zygote has divided many times to form a cluster of cells with a hollow space in the center. Within a few days, the zygote attaches to the uterine wall in the process called implantation. The cluster of cells that develop between the third and eighth week of pregnancy is called an embryo. After the eighth week, this developing group of cells is called a fetus. So let's talk about embryonic growth. So as the embryo grows, its cells continue to divide, forming three tissue layers that become various body systems. One layer becomes the respiratory or digestive system. A second layer develops into muscle, bone, blood vessels, and skin. And a third layer forms the nervous system, sense organs, and mouth. During this time, two important structures form outside the embryo. First is the amniotic sac, which is a thin fluid-filled membrane that surrounds and protects the developing embryo. It also insulates the embryo from temperature changes. The second is the umbilical cord. This is a rope-like structure that connects the embryo and the mother's placenta. The placenta is a thick, blood-rich tissue that lines the walls of the uterus during pregnancy and nourishes the embryo. Although the blood supply of the mother and the developing embryo are kept separate, materials do diffuse from one blood supply to the other through the umbilical cord. Nutrients and oxygen pass from the mother's blood to the embryo, and waste passes from the embryo to the mother and is diffused in the mother's blood. The waste are excreted from the mother's body along with her own waste. We need to remember that substances that are harmful to the developing embryo can pass through the umbilical cord as well. If a pregnant female uses harmful substances such as tobacco, alcohol, or other drugs, they can cross the placenta and harm the developing embryo. So we just want to look at the ovary releases the egg, and the egg is traveling down the fallopian tube. At the same time, sexual intercourse is had and sperm is introduced the fallopian tube, and all it needs is one sperm to fertilize an egg. It'll fertilize the egg. As the egg is moved down the fallopian tube with the finger-like projections that we talked about previously in chapter 18, the zygote travels down the fallopian tube towards the uterus and it keeps dividing. At about 6 days after the egg has been fertilized, the zygote burrows into the lining of the uterus and continues to grow. So let's talk about fetal development. So from the time of conception to birth, it is usually about 9 months. And during this 9 months, they're divided into 3 different periods called trimesters. So now let's take a look at these. And we need to remember early stages, it's a zygote. When it becomes implanted, it becomes an embryo, about the 3 to 8th weeks, and then the 8th week, it becomes a fetus. So let's look at the different things that happen during these developmental stages. So first, the first 2 weeks, 0 to 2 weeks. The zygote may float freely in the uterus for up to 48 hours before implanting. The spinal cord grows faster than the rest of the body. The brain, ears, and arms begin to form, and the heart forms begins to beat within the first 2 weeks. In weeks 3 to 8, the embryo is about 1 inch long at 8 weeks. The mouth, nostrils, eyelids, hands, fingers, feet, and toes begin to form. The nervous system can respond to stimuli, and the cardiovascular system is fully functional. The 9 to 14 week part is the fetus develops a human like profile, sex organs develop, eyelids, fingernails, and toenails develop. By the 12th week, the fetus can make crying motions, but no sound is made, and it may suck its thumb. And so during this 9 to 14 week period, that's why at 10 weeks is usually when parents can find out what gender the baby is. So if we go into the second trimester, this is 15 to 20 weeks. The fetus can't blink its eyes. The body begins to grow, and the growth of the head slows. The limbs reach full proportion, eyebrows, eyelashes develop, and the fetus can grasp and kick and become more active. In the 21 to 28th week, the fetus can hear conversations and has a regular cycle of waking and sleeping. The weight will start to increase rapidly. The fetus is about 12 inches long and weighs a little more than 1 pound. The fetus may survive if born after 24 weeks, but will require special medical care. And that's the end of the second trimester. Now, the third trimester is from the 29th week to the 40th week. This, the fetus uses all 5 senses and begins to pass water from the bladder. Brain scans have shown that some fetuses can actually dream during this period. And in the 8th and 9th month of development, approximately 266 days after conception, the baby weighs 6 to 9 pounds and is ready to be born. And so the first trimester, the baby's finishing forming all the basic processes and things that needs to survive. And third trimester is the baby is just growing, putting on weight, and becoming healthier so it can be born more easily. So now let's talk about the stages of birth, right? Labor. Final weeks of pregnancy, the fetus becomes more crowded in the uterus and becomes and puts increased demands on the mother's body. Most of the baby's head moves to the lower part of the uterus. Once the uterus of the mother, each of the contraction about is the the food lost. After that, 2 now, when the cervical fold laid down the mother body, birth takes its first clear lungs. Now, we talked before when we talked about respiratory system, is it is not a system made to have fluid in it. And the interesting thing is the baby's born or developed in a fluid environment. So what happens is there's a mucus plug in the nostrils and also in the throat that have to be broken, and that's why they used to slap babies on the butt, but now they pinch their foot to cause them to cry, which breaks that mucus plug and allows them to start breathing for the first time. Then we have stage 3, which is the afterbirth. So the placenta is still attached to the baby by the umbilical cord. Contractions continue until the placenta, now called the afterbirth, is pushed from the mother's body. The umbilical cord is cut to separate the placenta from the baby. And so here what they do is as the placenta, after it's removed from the mother, is they will usually tie off the umbilical cord about 3 to 4 inches away from the baby. And over the course of the next week or so, the baby's body will naturally close off the umbilical cord, and the 3 to 4 inches away from the body will fall off, and then that's what gives you your belly button.